Without further ado, I would like to welcome our speakers back to the panel. Welcome back, Gijs, and welcome back, Ulrich. And clearly, both of your initiatives are
I can't hear anything yet, is that correct?
Me too, I can't hear anything.
Okay.
So both of your initiatives are clearly pioneering in regards of stakeholder and consumer involvement and engagement, which is not quite common for policy processes in the past, but potentially a blueprint for collaborative multi-stakeholder achievements. Ulrich, I would like to understand what are the key challenges to initialize and maintain societal exchange processes, such as the further development of the green button.
We missed quite some part.
The sound came just now.
All right. So let me repeat that briefly to you. So my question was, as those open and collaborative multi-stakeholder processes are probably not quite common for policy making in the past, but maybe a blueprint for policy making of tomorrow. Ulrich, I would like to know what are the key challenges to initialize and most importantly, maintain societal exchange processes?
Okay, thank you for the question. I think most important, I have an echo, anyhow, I'll try to answer the question with the echo. Most important is that you get the stakeholders involved so that they show interest. Once from your policy-making side, you want them to be involved, for sure, they also need to commit for it. On the other hand, I think we have to be aware that these different groups have sometimes pretty much different approaches, pretty much different interests. And the question cannot really be how to bring them all together to the same interest, but how to at least have a platform where we discuss, where we exchange our understandings, our ideas, and then we come to, let's say, a maximum of common sense. Wouldn't mean that it's a common sense in all details, but yeah, considering the interests of the different stakeholder groups brings us to a process where we can identify a maximum of common sense. And this is sometimes very painful because you have to deal with different stakeholder groups, knowing that if they come from different directions, knowing that you can please the one and not so the other one, or you can. So you have to try to identify compromises and go for that. Challenging, but definitely the perfect approach for a joint future.
With that regard, it's even more special that you offer those consultations and really invite society and stakeholders along the supply chain to co-develop this quite transparently. Gijs, I would like to quote something from your presentation that I found really remarkable. Textiles are the new plastics. So, I mean, of course, in easy to understand probably when you think of the environmental, climate and social impact of textiles as fashion product, clothing is often overproduced and disposed just after a short lifespan in such a globalized and highly segmented industry. So thinking of the current pandemic that really hit the pause button for global textile supply chains, do you think that could finally be the breakthrough for sustainable textiles?
Well, good question. First of all, it's a quote by my state secretary. She once said it 2 years ago, to also have some more focus and some more attention for textiles and to make the industry more circular. But I think it is definitely a good momentum to implement new rules, new policies, new regulations, because I think the pandemic really showed how vulnerable global supply chains are with regard to all the products that we needed. For example, during the pandemic, for example, the mask that all of a sudden then the whole world needed, and we saw how dangerous a pandemic then can be, and also it gave us more awareness of the climate, of the finiteness of resources. So I think this is definitely the momentum to implement it, but it's really something that needs to happen not only from the bottom up, but also from the top down. And yeah, therefore, for example, this EU textile strategy that I just named is definitely a very useful instrument that could help in doing that. So I'm very happy that last year the Circular Economy Action Plan by the European Commission got approved by the Environmental Council. But now it's really time for a next step. So really to come to a specific and a very concrete plan that is also understandable for entrepreneurs. Because you cannot only talk about entrepreneurs, but you really have to talk with them. And that is also with regard to your previous question to Ulrich, that I think in order to maintain societal exchange processes, that you really need to have an exchange between top down and bottom up instead of talking alongside each other, so to say. So yeah, I think it could be a momentum, but we still have to prove it, I guess. Yeah.
Are there any indications, that's a question to both of you, that sustainable practices and sustainable and circular business models are more resilient to actually navigate through those kind of crises?
Yes, I think there have been. I mean, when you look at circular business models, I think it's very good that a lot is being produced locally. You need less resources, so you're less dependent on other parts of the world. And now, for example, Southeast Asia or Middle Africa, you name it, Middle America, those areas now seem further than ever. So I think circular entrepreneurs really prove that a lot can be done here in Europe, here in Germany, or in the Netherlands. So I think now is also the time for them to prove themselves and to really prove their added value in this debate. So I think some best practices within the circular fashion industry really proved themselves over the last year. Yeah.
We will see. Let's probably, Ulrich, as you're also in close conversation with many different companies along the value chain, whether it's suppliers or manufacturers or brands or marketplaces, what do you think? Is it more of a challenge that threatens business models, or is it? Can we see it more as an opportunity for the industry to really change? Ulrich, are you here with us? Probably, Gijs, you can jump in here. So just thinking of the multiple conversations you had, and also looking back at the circular design sprints where we discussed all kinds of different business models, what you refer to is probably also highlighting the need of nearshoring and local supply chains. Are there other aspects of business models that you think are favoring resilience? Can you give a couple of examples?
I think, for example, what always fascinates me is also the using instead of owning business models. So when you look at new business model for the circular economy, I think those initiatives also proved to be resilient during the pandemic. For example, that people, I don't know, it's funny that a lot of people always told me, like, why should I buy new clothes now? I don't see anyone anyway. And I get that viewpoint, but I think it's also, I mean, you don't just buy clothes to look good for others. You also buy them because you want to have a certain experience. But then this experience should not be linked to ownership. It can also be used as something you just use. So you use a specific piece of clothing and then you bring it back. And what has also been very promising is something that I personally used a lot over the last year, was just to clean out my own wardrobe and see what clothing I have left. And I sold that on like the countless platforms, for example, eBay Kleinanzeigen, Kleiderkreis or Vinted, to really promote a second-hand market. And that is also what I try to do now with, for example, all my shoes. I always try to buy them second-hand over these platforms instead of buying the new ones, because many of the people offer the shoes that I'm looking for. So yeah, that is just to name a personal example.
Yeah. I can't agree more. It's a real pleasure to see that those new business models are really on the rise now, dynamized by this global pandemic. But Ulrich, I was asking, as you're in really close conversation with a lot of companies and organizations along the supply chain, probably you could give us a deeper dive. What is your impression? Are sustainable business models more resilient, or is this global pandemic an overall threat to the German textile economy? Ulrich, can you hear me?
No, I don't think it's a threat to the textile. Yeah. There's a so what I wanted to say is that it's definitely not a threat. The pandemic is not a threat to the economy, to the textile economy. It is for the moment, for sure, but I'm pretty sure that we will overcome that in the future. And I do believe that it will give us the opportunity to think about more resilient economies and to push sectors like the textile sector. Currently we have time because we don't use time for shopping. So maybe we have time to think about and to create awareness, not only but also about sustainability, about life, important what life is about. And if you look in the textile sector, we know that sustainability is a very big issue for some of us, but has at the same time big challenges to being implemented. And I do believe that the pandemic can help us to give it a push. And this push will definitely also, in the end, will also strengthen the sector, make it more sustainable, but also economically sustainable, if you look at the right products and the right way of producing and selling them.
Yeah, I agree, Gijs.
I would like to add that a bit. I think it's also very important to keep this momentum during this pandemic. For example, during the last presidency of Germany in the European Council, of course, all the attention went from the climate crisis to Corona. And what I thought was very good is that they called it green recovery. So they said, okay, we need to build back better, but also greener. And that was very satisfying to me to see that. So I think it's important also after the pandemic to not then lose our focus again, like we did, for example, 10 years ago during the economic crisis, but that we really keep this climate crisis in focus. And that also a pandemic or a economic crisis that might follow after it should not threaten that focus and that attention. And I think yesterday, for example, with the inauguration of new President Biden and the rejoinment of the US in the climate agreement is a very good first step. So I hope that is promising for the coming years. But it's, pandemic should not lead to a loss of focus, for example. So I hope all the, for example, young protesters from Fridays for Future, that they would return after everybody got a vaccine. But it's important to name that.
Yeah. I also believe there's quite a momentum of optimism and embracing the future. But I would like to take it a bit further, Ulrich. Clearly, standardization is needed to provide aligned measures for good practice along the entire value chain. So we need to understand what good products and good practice actually mean, and this is why initiatives like yours are so important. But thinking of technology on the rise, such as, I don't know, machine learning, blockchain, all these buzzwords that are flying around, do you think technology can accelerate transparency, like digital track and trace systems and such?
Yes, I do believe we need technology for that. Without technology, it will be very difficult. I'll just give you a very simple example. Currently, on all products which are certified with the green button, we have a QR code, and through that QR code, consumers can follow information about the company that either produces or retails the products. And we want to go further with that. We want definitely to go deeper into the value chain, to have more transparency about how products, how accessories, how textiles and so on are being produced. And if we have the technology coming through digitalization, we will definitely have better opportunities to make that more transparent. It needs the support of the companies, of the producing and retailing companies. They have to commit themselves. They need to partner, for instance, with activities or certificates like the green button. But if we have technological support, we can do much more. We can show transparency in a much better way. Consumer can get information which otherwise they would never be able to get. I've just listened to a presentation a few days back about the cacao sector in Africa. There you can, from the chocolate you eat, you can follow back information to the farmer on the field. So I do believe technology will help us also in the textile sector to be more transparent.
And it could also help to communicate those transparency-related information about the supply chain that are often very technical and not easy to understand, and help it to translate it to the end consumer, be it a tag on the clothes, to really gamify this kind of heavy weighting topic and make it fun and easy to understand sustainability aspects of the end product. Let's move on, because there was one aspect that I found really interesting in your presentation, Gijs. You mentioned the importance of public procurement, and I have that impression too, that public procurement seems to play a crucial role to turn theory into practice. But as it's not the norm yet, obviously there must be a couple of challenges coming with that. So there obviously the public procurement can be a tipping point for the industry's shift in regards to the impact and the commonness of textiles as uniforms and corporate clothing and corporate textiles, and I mean the towels we use in the hotel and the curtains we see in our town halls and so on. Thinking of those textiles, I mean, the quantities are enormous. They're very ubiquitous, and I have the impression that Germany and the Netherlands are both setting clear targets towards a more circular and responsible public procurement. So can you help us to understand the challenges and the opportunities coming along with public procurement, sustainable public procurement?
Yeah, I think it was one of the most outstanding examples that the Netherlands and Germany both had in their strategy come to a more sustainable textile sector. And I heard that on October 1st, when we had our Circular Textiles event, where you were also there, as you knew, and you were also moderating the panel back then. And back then, the German and the Dutch ministry, they really said that it is really an example to be an example for society, more or less. So it is a role as a ministry to give the right example and to highlight the possibilities that these businesses could have, or that these circular entrepreneurs could have. Because I think all the circular entrepreneurs know, also the ones viewing today, that it's very difficult to have a big audience for your story and to be heard and to be listened to, and that also policymakers change their way of thinking into a more circular, more holistic way. So I think that is the biggest challenge for ministries and for regulators that choose public procurement, to not choose the cheapest option, but to choose the wisest option and the most long-term option. And then an example could also be, again, like I just said, like the using instead of owning principle, or why would we buy these uniforms when we could also buy those. Good example, for example, in the Netherlands is the drivers of all our ministers. funny story. They wear suits made by Dutch Spirit, which is the Dutch company making tailor-made suits. And then all the drivers of our ministers, they wear their suits now. But that's just a very small group, for example. So that is not a very big impact yet. I mean, I'm still waiting for my own permission to get a tailor-made suit from Dutch Spirit, paid for by my ministry. Unfortunately, I don't have one yet. But I think that could be a good example, to see how public procurement could add to that debate. But I think, giving the right example, that is the answer to your question.
Fingers crossed that you can make that happen.
Or I should get one myself, of course.
But actually...
maybe Marte, I can...
Yeah, of course.
I can add from the green button side that currently public procurement is for us a very important issue. We are currently aligning the recommendations of the green button to the public procurement. It's on the one hand, it's a big, and it can also help us to boost the green button in society and to make it more common, more known, and we do believe that it might have a win-win situation. The winner in the end is the sustainability which we're all looking for.
Yeah. Actually, I remember, or I have the impression that corporate textiles such as uniforms and clothing for hospitals are very commonly provided through rental systems. So actually public procurement is really pioneering in circular economy. So maybe this could really be the tipping point in here. Thanks for sharing. I would actually like to read a couple of questions from the audience to you, if I may. Very interesting. So thanks for your remarks and your questions. One question is for you, Ulrich. Can African countries and their brands and suppliers participate in the Green Button certification?
Yeah, we're on the way to make that possible. We started the Green Button in Germany, but always with the intention to go international. Just a few weeks back, we certified the first Danish company, and we are preparing currently, as I mentioned in my presentation earlier, for the Green Button 2.0, and with that version, we also have the intention to go international, beyond Europe, and for sure, then hopefully Africa can also be part, or should be part of the activities.
Yeah, definitely. Looking forward. Thank you. There's another question to you, Gijs. How do you see imports to the EU over the next couple of years being part of the circular fashion economy?
Imports to the EU?
Yeah.
I think, well, it's a good question. I think it's important that we not only have a vision in Europe, so we're talking about this EU textile strategy. I think something like that could only work then if you also implement it on a global level, and that's why, for example, the Sustainable Development Goals are very important, and that is also what the European Commission is always doing. They're kind of filtering big, like global, generic, Sustainable Development Goals to more concrete goals and targets within Europe.
Yeah.
So I think, also make them part of the Sustainable Development Goals. That would be my answer, to also protect other countries and involve other countries in our own ambitions. Yeah.
And I mean, your initiatives, the initiatives from Germany and the Netherlands, are only examples of initiatives of various countries. But I mean, those bilateral collaborations can clearly probably lead the path or be an inspiration. But there's a quick question also to you, Gijs. If you could shortly explain the abbreviations PCR and EPR.
Sorry. PCR means post-consumer resource, and EPR means extended producer responsibility.
Thank you.
My apologies. Sorry, I should have put that in my presentation.
No, this is probably a test if our visitors today are listening carefully. So they are, as you can see. There's another question from the audience, apparently to both of you, Gijs and Ulrich. They would love to get into action. Are there resources, maybe as simple as a list of requirements to follow? How can they get involved?
I mean, it depends who wants to get involved. Yeah, I mentioned in my presentation that we currently started the consultation process to develop the green button next version. You find the details on our homepage, www.grünerknopf.de, and we are happy for anybody participating in the consultation. When it is about companies, about retailing companies, about producing companies, I think it would be good to contact us directly, and we can give you information on how the green button works and how companies can get involved. And when it is about NGOs, maybe we're working currently with a lot of NGOs, but if there are additional NGOs interested to get in contact with us, please use the contact through our website, and we'll be happy to answer your questions and to give you the necessary information.
And to quickly add on that, we will also share further information in our follow-up aftermath communication. So there will be links, there will be presentations and further information to, and also a guidance how to actually get involved. Gijs, are there any opportunities to interact with the All Goods program? Anything ahead?
Definitely, yes, definitely. This was also a good momentum and a good moment for me to invite everyone to join us, or to at least contact me or contact Valerie Ann. Because it's good to know that, of course, we are an embassy, so we're always a connector between the two. For example, the denim deal is something that I could inform people about, but then the people in The Hague would take over because it's really a Dutch initiative. And what we try to do is really to be that link between the two countries. And therefore, we also started the All Goods program, like I just said. So we're always looking for new collaborations. We don't have an end date to our project. It is, like I said, it just started. At least we're going to do it until this summer, but we might even add another year to it, or as long as it stays relevant, and it is probably going to be a very long time. And it's also good to know that it's not only focusing on new material use in fashion, but also in the field of design and architecture, because we feel that this interdisciplinarity between these three sectors is also very interesting and could lead to new insights. So if there are local entrepreneurs here in Berlin, or even outside of Berlin, in Germany, in the Netherlands, please reach out to me to see if we could do something together.
Yeah, thank you. Looking very much forward. There is a very specific question to you guys. An example from the Netherlands. Just let me read that as a quote. "We work on cell-based fur and wool from petri dishes out of Amsterdam. Not one single Dutch state agency ever supported our various sustainability patented projects. And they ask, the Netherlands must do much better support of innovation." What would you answer?
Okay. Well, I mean, she or he could definitely reach out to me. But like I said, I'm an embassy in Germany, so maybe I'm not the right person to talk to. But I think, I don't know, this is not the view that I have on our government or on the Netherlands. I think, for example, the Ministry of Economic Affairs, the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, they do a lot in supporting Dutch innovation, I feel. This morning even, there was a signing of an innovation pact between Germany and the Netherlands, signed by our two ministers, also showing that I think there is a lot of innovation happening in both countries, and the government always tries to see it. But of course, I mean, there is always a blind spot, something that we don't see, that we don't get, or maybe the wrong people were in place. I don't know, but reach out to me, and I'll try to connect them to the right people. Yeah.
And also back to the person or the participants who actually made that remark, we would also be happy to make that connection, also because we're interested in learn more about this really interesting and inspiring concept. So
Yeah.
there's another question. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you repeat what he or she is doing again? Because it sounded very interesting.
Cell-based fur and wool
Yeah.
from petri dishes out of Amsterdam. So lab-grown
Okay.
wool and fur from the center of Amsterdam. I would love to touch it.
100% fit for our program. So please let him or her read to me.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Give it to us. We wanna touch it, and we would really like to learn more about that project and that concept. So thanks for the remark. There is an interesting question actually to both of you. What are the biggest shifts in consumer behavior and trends that you have seen with regards to circular fashion versus fast fashion? We talked about rental, wardrobes. Is there anything else that you can think of?
Well, I also see a big trend in people making their own clothes. For example, a good friend of mine here in Berlin, she's all into like buying circular or reused materials and making them into new pieces of clothing. So really do DIY, do it yourself, next to all these platforms that I just named for secondhand clothing. Because I think that the I call them old-fashioned vintage shops, for example, all the shops that we have here in Berlin. I mean, they're still very relevant, but I think the focus also shifted from stores to what is in your own house. So do it yourself in combination with secondhand. I think that is the biggest transformation that I saw of the last year. Yeah.
Is there anything from your ecosystem, Ulrich, that you think worth to mention here? These are the pleasures of current technology. So let's get back to that.
Was bad.
Yeah, once Ulrich is back with us, but there are more questions, so I'm afraid we won't have enough time to read all to you. But I have one remark that I would like to share with you. I quote it: "I totally agree that policymakers are the good way to push private companies to become greener and change their ways. But in some countries, it seems like the government initiatives sound great, but a lot of companies are not ready for it yet, especially not able to step into the public tender alone. Do you have ideas how to introduce, for example, uniform companies with the recyclers?" That's an interesting and very specific question. Ulrich, you probably back with us. This is probably relevant to you. Did you have the chance to hear my question or the feedback from our audience? We have a bit of an unstable connection, but Gijs, feel free to refer to that because it is also relevant for you.
Yes, definitely. I heard your question. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you. Yeah. I can repeat the question. Yeah, wonderfully well. Ulrich, probably let's let Gijs jump in here, and happy to repeat that to you in a second.
Yeah, I think what is most important as a tip is really to, again, have people talk to each other. So have representatives from the government, not only from national governments, but also from municipalities, talk to these entrepreneurs. And that is also really a message. That is really a message to also to the policymakers in particular, because I think the bottom-up sector really tries to be connected and to be heard and to be understood. But I think in that sense, some governments could do more. I think our national government is doing quite a good job or tries to do it. But I mean, the grassroots are in the municipalities and in the cities. And there, I think a lot more could happen. So this is also a comment for the German cities, because, for example, I did my master thesis research last year in Berlin, and I saw a very diffuse image of who was involved. For example, the Senate here in Berlin. I think they're slowly starting to get the point and to really be engaged. So yeah, that is I think the important question. Talk to each other and make sure that everybody understands each other. So these tenders can also be more accessible for small and medium enterprises.
I also see that there's a shift to make those tenders more accessible and readable and easier to understand. So there's probably an end insight for over-administrated processes. But there's another interesting question, Ulrich. So there, let me cite that we have so many certificates out there, 30 plus as far as I know, and we both know that there's more than 100 textile standards and certificates, or even more. Do we need to standardize more? So this is important to you. Why another standard?
Yeah, the intention of the green button is not to add more, an additional standard to the sector. We do believe that we have too many standards already, and we do know that there are some very good and very transparent standards, and we want to build on them. And what we developed with the green button is what we call a meta certificate, where we, as a green button, acknowledge other standards which are fulfilling the criteria which we have set when it comes to, for instance, to product requirements. And with that, these existing standards or existing certificates will even be put in more value, more recognition through the green button, because we do believe that consumers have to get a clear information and a simple information what sustainability means and what of all these different certificates and labels it really stands for sustainability. And this is what we intend with the green button, with making the green button a meta certificate.
So it's more of an umbrella standard that accomplishes the existing ones. And also thinking of standards and certificates also being run as business models, not always, but sometimes. Of course, a governmental initiative that is independent and not profit-oriented can also give a bit more transparency and overview over those different standards that are out there, right?
Yes, I mean, currently we know that this initiative for the green button is strongly supported by German government. On the long run, it for sure has to be self-sustainable in a way that it has to exist without any governmental financial support. But it will never. It's not meant to be a profit-making system. It's really meant to be a transparency-making system for consumers. So to make the textile garment sector more sustainable and to let consumers better understand how they can contribute to that and buying garments and textiles in a right way to increase sustainability.
Yeah, indeed. There's another question that I would like to share because it's really interesting, and we were talking about that initially as well. To you, Ulrich, how important is an European Supply Chain Act? How do you see the current state of the German initiative?
I think it's very important to have a European common understanding and a European regulation. Currently, German government, the different ministries which are being involved are discussing the German initiative, which has been started by our Minister Gerd Müller. And when I see it from the perspective of the green button, I do believe that the green button has the potential to show that companies are, for sure not all of them, but there are companies out which are already ready for more sustainability, for a transparent and responsible due diligence process. This is what the green button wants to show, and this is what hopefully on a European level will come not only as a a volunteer activity, but also as a mandatory act in the hopefully very near future.
Yeah, we really hope to see this coming. I can't agree more that a European initiative is needed, but that's probably even more complex compared to the challenging process you're experiencing with the green button, as you mentioned, Ulrich. We have a bit more time, so I'm really happy about the many different questions that arise from the audience. One question that I would like to pose to you, Gijs. You're clearly an expert, of course, on circularity. Have you also looked into the donut model that Amsterdam is embracing, apparently also to mend post-coronavirus economy?
Interesting question, because I always when I tell friends or family that I'm into circular economy and that I'm working in that field, and also I started this whole circular journey, as I call it, when I was still doing my bachelor's 6 years ago. And funny enough, I must answer that question with no. Of course, I heard about it. I read about it also for my thesis, but I don't know. I just simply don't know enough about it to really make the comparison. I think it has something to do with what you need, and that the market automatically adapts to it. Maybe I'm getting it wrong, so please don't condemn me for it. But no, I'm in that sense completely focused on circularity and circular economy. I also think, and I read that it is also more promising. So in that sense, I like to stick with it. Yeah.
But it's also very clever from our audience to first post a compliment and then put you on the hot seat. That's
very good. Yeah, I really get it.
The beautiful side effects of public debates and policy labs. Very nice. Definitely. Thanks for the question. So there is one very generic question to you, Ulrich, and this is probably also referring to your work, Gijs, but let's start with Ulrich. A general question is, are we seeing a general change in policies?
I mean, it's a very general question, but I do believe that, yes, we see a change in policies. With all the, I mean, if you look into the textile sector, this is what we concentrate on now, with all the things and activities which we have seen in the past. I mean, starting from events like Rana Plaza, but also understanding more and more how the working conditions are for workers in the textile and garment sector, understanding how complicated the supply chains are, understanding that people have been looking for T-shirts for €2 or €5 and not considering what that means to working conditions for this T-shirts being produced. I have the feeling that more and more people really see that we cannot continue like this. We're coming to an end. We have, or the textile industry has traveled all continents, and I would say now lastly arrived in Africa, and we have to understand that this way of exploiting people, workers, has to change, and one way definitely is to look into more sustainability and into better production environments, conditions for the workers, and that will also change the consumer perspective and consumption. So I do believe that we really came to a point where things are changing. These steps are passing slowly. It's not a very fast development, but I do believe that 10, 15 years back, nobody would have been interested in discussions which we are having today. And I heard that we have more than 1,000 people participating today. So I do believe that you are the proof for change happening currently.
Yeah, and that is a perfect handover to the next question. So apparently our audience would like to get a glimpse of your daily operations and the tools you're using, Ulrich. So what has been your most successful tools to attract and involve as many companies and consumers as possible to change our fashion system?
Well, I think it's a mix. You can't say there's this is the one tool. We do work on very different levels. For me, still very important is to approach companies one by one. With the direct contact, you achieve a lot. On the other hand, we also spend a lot of money for communication, for PR activities, but maybe if you want to see the multi-stakeholder approach as a tool, I do believe that is probably the tool which on the long term will show the biggest impact, because as I mentioned before, here we are bringing different stakeholders with different interests together, and they suddenly start to understand the other's perspective and the other's thinking, and try to work on to find a common ground. And I do believe this is the strongest tool which we have in the current development of sustainability activities.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Probably you need to be independent, and you can't promote and highlight special examples from your ecosystems. But there was a question that I would like to share with you. Which brands would you say are doing a good job, or at least started a good initiatives in terms of circular fashion economy? And of course, it also refers to you, Ulrich, but also to your work, Gijs. Can you, just to make it a bit more tangible and understandable, can you name a couple of brands and pioneering companies?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm very impressed here in Germany by the work of Chibo Share, so the Chibo Share principle. And in the Netherlands, like I said, Mud Jeans, we have We Wear, we have Dutch Spirit, Fiber Sword is doing a good job, Daiko, painting clothing with CO2. Yeah, so that is from the Netherlands, and yeah, from Germany, Chibo Share. I think I could best leave that to Ulrich.
Participating in the green button, and you can find them all on our homepage. I can say that they are like they're brands from very different perspectives. We have outdoor brands like VD. We have brands like Gijs mentioned them, Chibo, but we also have some small brands. We have brands which since years have been working or following sustainability issues like Hess Natur. So there's a wide range. I can't name them all, but you can find them all on our homepage.
Also like to add, same goes for the Dutch brands. They are all named on the Holland Circular Hotspot website. So that's hollandcircularhotspot.nl.
Right. Thanks a lot. These links will also be shared in the aftermath communications. As time is flying, we have only space for 2 more questions before we need to wrap up. One is, since we can expect a more intensive collaboration between Dutch and German institutions now, can we also expect the German government to adopt a national circularity strategy? Ulrich, putting you on a hot seat.
That is a very... I think, yes. I mean, they already have their program for resource efficiency. So that is often seen as the German version of a circular economy strategy. I think it will come, but I'm not the right person to ask. Definitely not. But I'm in close contact with colleagues from the Umweltministerium, so the Ministry for Environment here in Germany. And I definitely saw tremendous transition over the last 2 years. So I've been working at the embassy for almost 2 years now, and I already see a big difference with 2 years ago. So I think this could definitely be an upcoming thing. They all have the best will. They all do a lot in this field. So but I'm not the right person to ask. So I think the first signs are definitely there. And also, good to mention, under German presidency, the European Commission also adapted the EU action plan on circular economy. So Germany is doing a great job. There's just not a really specific, concrete circular economy strategy yet, but hey, hopefully it's coming soon.
Ulrich, is there anything you can add?
Me too. I'm not the right person to do that. I'm not able to speak on behalf of German government. So we are an implementing organization, implementing development cooperation activities. And in that context, I think this question should go to the government, to the ministries, and I can't really answer them.
Yeah. Thank you. There's one final question, which is probably even the hardest, but I would like to ask both of our panelists today to make a final statement based on the question. And the question is, do you think fashion can be completely sustainable, meaning 100% sustainable?
I would say we are at a stage currently where we improve from day to day. Sustainability is now for the textile sector, for fashion, but not only for fashion, in many people's mind, and is growing. The impact of the whole movement to make things more sustainable is really growing. It is a long process. I do believe that in the end, everything we do has to be sustainable, not only in the textile and garment sector, and to make it with some other words. And if we're not yet 100% sustainable, we did not yet reach the end of our way. But for sure, I mean, seriously, this is a question, where do you reach 100%? Our goal currently is that we achieve more and more sustainability, let's say every day or with every step we make. And if one day we reach at 100%, that would be amazing. But as long as we continuously improve, we're on the very good way.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I think what Ulrich already said, like, I think it's very difficult to also measure what is 100%. How do you define 100% sustainability? But I mean, never say never in that sense, maybe a cliche, but who would have thought 1.5 years ago that we would be in a pandemic and that there would be a vaccine and that all of a sudden everything would be over? I mean, we're not there yet. But I mean, stranger things happen. So I would definitely keep up the high hopes. And I mean, I think the biggest change is also going to be a shift in behavior. So how do we look at clothing? I mean, clothing has been a principle for centuries, but maybe in a few decades we will completely do something different, or we have virtual clothing. I don't know. It's the future will tell. But I think it could definitely be achievable at one point. But we are really just starting, I think, since a few years. So it's a long way ahead.
That's a perfect closing statement. Thanks a lot to our speakers today, Gijs Könings and Ulrich Plein. It was really a pleasure. We were clearly monitoring your work as you have a busy time ahead. Thanks for sharing and for inspiring us and the audience with your ambitious initiatives, and all the best for the work ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Marte.